Hey there, and welcome to Atlassian University's course on how to run effective meetings. Now, most of us have a lot of meetings on our calendar. And in some way it makes sense, right? Meetings can be a helpful tool for us all to communicate. But the problem that we've all experienced is that most meetings are painful, expensive, and really just a waste of time. So why are our meetings like this? Well, the truth is that running effective meetings is a skill you can build over time. It's a skill that's valuable for anyone to learn at any level in an organization, because we all have to spend time in meetings, right? So we might as well use that time to be productive, efficient, and hey, maybe even enjoy our time together. Well, that's what you're about to learn. This course was designed by Atlassian's top work futurists to give you the latest insights, tips, and best practices to make your meetings the most valuable and effective they can be. After this course, you'll be able to lead highly focused and efficient meetings, create clear meeting goals and agendas, keep your attendees actively involved and engaged, and use the Atlassian playbook to improve meeting success. At the end of the course, you can pass a multiple choice assessment on the Atlassian University website, and you'll earn an official badge you can share with your network. So, are you ready for better meetings? Watch the next video to continue learning. In this video, you will learn the typical problems with most meetings and what is an effective meeting. Let's start with the typical problems.
I think we've all been in a meeting, probably in the last week. We kind of came out of it thinking like, that wasn't the best use of my time, or that wasn't that effective. The stats today tell us that only 50% of the time we spend in meetings is considered effective. That means half the time we're spending in meetings, we don't feel like we're adding any value. And along those lines, at least in the US, $37 billion is spent on bad meetings. So bad meetings are rampant in society today. And for us, there's actually 10 core areas that we think bad meetings fall into. We essentially call it bad meeting bingo. And for us, there's a couple of these that really resonate out there, specifically areas like focus. Do meetings have fluid borders? Do you really have no purpose coming in? You just show up and you're like, so what are we talking about today? Things like loops. Do we have like this Groundhog's Day feeling where we just kind of keep going back to the same topic over and over again? Oh, we talked about this last time. We're going to talk about it again. Even things like readiness, and not just on you, the facilitator's part, but on your participants. Are we coming into the meeting ready to have this meeting? Have we done the pre-work? Have we actually come in prepared to actually have a good conversation? And ultimately, one of the worst problems out there is results. Do we leave a meeting not making any decisions, not coming to any kind of conclusion on how we want to move forward? Did we not hit an outcome? So for us, these are some of those core areas why meetings may not be as effective as they could be.
So what is an effective meeting then? And what makes it effective?
So for us, there's a couple things that kind of go into an effective meeting. They need to have a pre-established goal. What is it that we're trying to accomplish? 2, they provide value to the people who are attending that meeting. Actually there's an outcome we're going for that people feel like this was a good use of my time. And finally, all participants are engaged and they actually leave feeling like, hey, I actually got value out of this. This was a good use of my time. Ultimately, it comes down to my favorite word, intent. Effective meetings are actually created and run intentfully. I like to think about this as a sort of a Venn diagram, but around business outcomes and cultural outcomes. What are the things you're trying to achieve around those spaces? And typically meetings are built around those. When we think of our business outcomes, we think about things like, is the intent of this meeting to impact a desired outcome? Are we actually trying to make a change happen? Maybe we want to produce actionable information. We want to go into a meeting and come out with stuff that we can make decisions on, or we've actually made a decision on. And ultimately, we may even want to provide visibility to leadership on how things are going, or maybe we want to get visibility with leadership to show off some of the great things we're doing. Then there's the cultural outcomes we need to think about. Things like, are we holding this meeting because it's a critical touch point in an async world for our team? How do we prevent things like the lone wolf syndrome, where people don't feel so isolated and disengaged from their world? Is this meeting in place to help us rapidly accelerate on some sort of idea as a team? Or maybe the intent of this meeting is to help us leverage the wisdom of crowds. How do we help bring about this diverse set of experience and knowledge to create something better than any one of us can do ourselves? Understanding the intent of an effective meeting is about balancing this business outcome with this cultural outcome. Ultimately, in the end, we want to achieve both, and that allows both you and your participants to get the most out of your time together.
In this video, you will learn how to determine if you need a meeting and some tips to build your own meeting decision tree. Let's start with a few ways to determine if you need a meeting. Now, most of our calendars are packed with meetings, sometimes being double booked or even triple booked. But do we really need all these meetings on the calendar? Is this the most effective way to get things done?
Meetings have become this thing where we just have a lot of them and they don't always feel great. And so there's that question of going, does this need to be in a meeting?
So, how do you determine if you really need that meeting or if there's some better way to spend that time?
When determining whether or not you need a meeting, there's three things I like to think about. So one, what are we trying to solve? Really, what's the outcome we're trying to get to? Are we trying to collaborate on a problem? Am I trying to share information with you? Really getting to kind of the crux of what does it mean to actually succeed in this meeting? What's the outcome we want to get to? Number two, what's the best way to achieve this? We always default to a meeting. So we have to change that behavior. Maybe it could be an instant message. It could be a Confluence page. I work with a team right now that actually spends most of its time in different parts of the globe, but it's really hard for us to collaborate. So what we've done is we've kind of come up with new ways to collaborate that doesn't involve a meeting. We use things like Confluence to actually co-create documentation around the globe, around the clock. And then we use tools like Loom to allow us to kind of go and express maybe our thoughts on what's going on. What have I done in the last week, or what have I done since yesterday? And be able to share that back, because it's a lot easier than maybe writing something down or trying to articulate an idea that's just too complex. We use these Loom videos and Confluence pages to give us an opportunity to kind of figure out how do we want to work the next day. And then that way we have only certain touch points we need to worry about with each other versus trying to have a daily meeting to stay in sync. And finally, the third thing you need to think about, who actually needs to be at that meeting? Are you meeting with a person or are you meeting with a group? If you're meeting with a person, is this something that you need to have a meeting for? Is it best maybe done through an instant message or some sort of other collaboration means? If it's a group, what are you trying to share? Are you just trying to share information? If you're just trying to share information, maybe that's also done better through sharing out something like a Confluence page in a Loom. Again, when you're thinking about the meetings that you have today, don't default to just have the meeting. Think about, how could I do this a little differently? If I need help answering these questions, Atlassian has actually come up with kind of a cheeky, fun view of how we can better identify whether or not we need to have a meeting. We call it the, why do I want to call this meeting decision tree? So if you walk through it, it kind of gives you these kind of fun areas to say, maybe I'm trying to share information, or maybe I want to build relationships. And it starts asking me some questions like, is this a one-on-one? Is this just trying to push information out there? And it helps you kind of determine whether or not you actually need to hold this meeting. For example, you probably don't need to have a meeting to, let's say, read through the contents of a Confluence page you just sent out. Or if you just don't know any other way to collaborate. Trust me, there are other ways to collaborate that don't involve a meeting. Now, the thing is this chart is great. It's fun. It's something that we use. But based on your organizational behaviors, your cultural, behaviors in your organization, you may actually want to come up with your own. Work with the organization or even just your own team to create a meeting decision tree of your own in order to improve your meeting culture. You can then use your decision tree as a working agreement to eliminate unnecessary meetings and promote better meeting behaviors. Again, find what works best for you. And I usually try to lead with, if I couldn't have a meeting for this, How else could I get it accomplished? Put it into a decision tree to help you kind of think through that.
In this video, you'll learn the 4 principles to an effective meeting, how to build a meeting agenda, who you should invite to your meeting, and tools and tips for meeting preparation. Let's start with the 4 principles. So once you've decided that you need a meeting, there are 4 principles to make sure it's effective. There's preparation, facilitation, participation, and follow-up. So you are now in the preparation stage. It's one of the most important stages in the entire process. This stage is all about doing the right pre-work and sharing that out with your participants before the meeting ever starts. Pre-work is essential for transforming your meetings and preventing unnecessary waste. Let's learn more about the preparation stage.
So we're in our preparation stage now. And so as we think about preparing for a meeting, there's a couple things you need to keep in mind. When you actually say, I need this meeting, the first thing you do is not set up the meeting. The first thing you need to do before you send anything out, build an agenda. What are the topics you want to cover in this agenda? It goes back to that idea of being very intentful with your time, thinking about the outcomes. To me, I like to focus on time boxing my agenda. Focus in on doing things like maybe setting aside 10 to 15 minute increments for each item on your agenda. Anything more than that, people might find themselves kind of drifting off, or you might start wandering off topic. Within your agenda, make sure you identify what's the outcome for each one of those topics. Yes, I want to present on something, but why am I presenting it? Again, am I information sharing? Am I trying to make a decision with this group? Am I trying to gather ideas? Be very explicit. And then also identify who's going to own that topic. Who's going to help drive that conversation? Even though you may be the facilitator, someone is presenting that topic, and your role is to help ensure that we hit that outcome and maintain that time box.
All right, so you got your agenda set. Now who should you invite to your meeting?
Now this goes back down to, again, the intent of the meeting. What are you trying to do? Don't blast out that invite to multiple people and just hope you get the right folks. For every person you add to the invite, make sure you ask yourself the question, what's in it for this person to spend time in my meeting versus going somewhere else or doing something else? The thing is if you say, well, they just need to be here, that's not a good enough answer. Go through and say, well, what is their role going to be in this meeting? Are they going to help me make a decision? Do I need their expertise in something? Or are they part of a team that I need to share information with? Again, be very explicit with who you're bringing and why. And at that point, that's when you can invite them. That way they recognize, this is the role I'm going to play versus, hey, should I be here? And so once you've actually built out your agenda, you've actually figured out who needs to attend, then and only then should you go ahead and send out an invite. And in that invite, make sure that in the description, you've either included the actual copy and paste to the agenda, or you've included a link to something like a Confluence page that includes that. Never, ever, ever send a meeting invite that says agenda to come. That is just a way to cop out of actually putting together that agenda, doing that preparation.
As you're getting prepared for your meeting, are there any other tools or tips to use?
To me, it all goes back to, again, what do you want to try to achieve in the meeting? What's the intent of the meeting? If you're having a one-way kind of information sharing meeting, tools like PowerPoint and Keynote are great for that. They help convey information very well to an audience. Now, if you're in a more of a collaborative meeting, maybe you're trying to make a decision, or maybe you're just trying to brainstorm things, there's other tools out there. Confluence is really good for sharing information and allowing people to kind of review and collaborate on it. Tools like Mural are really great whiteboarding tools that allow you to go in and actually have some rapid brainstorming. You can even use polling tools like Slido or Mentimeter. These are great tools that I've found in my meetings that I like to employ at certain times to kind of get the poll of the room, especially in a large group, on a certain question that I have. So think creatively about how you can use tools to, one, engage your audience, but then also make sure when you're using those tools, you're using them with intent. You're not just using them because you can. And another pro tip here is if you're going to use these tools, make sure you get those tools prepped beforehand. I hate going into a meeting and someone's like, oh, look, we're going to go review this Confluence page and I don't know where it is. Be prepared. Link that in your agenda. What are we going to review? Where are we going to do it at?
In this video, you will learn how to facilitate a meeting, tips to boost attendee participation, and how to end a meeting. Remember, there are 4 principles to an effective meeting: preparation, facilitation, participation, and follow-up. You are now in the facilitation phase.
So you've made it. You're actually at your meeting. You've done all the preparation. You made sure the right people are there. So for me, I usually tell my meeting facilitators, when you start a meeting, always make sure you cover the ground rules. Gentle reminders. I usually like to include this at the top of my, agenda page in Confluence. I say, here are the 3 or 4 things that we agree to follow. That, we're not going to talk over each other. We're going to make sure we're going to raise our hands if we want to say something. These are little things that, again, as a quick reminder, allow people to, again, become conscious of it and realize that, all right, this is how we act when we're together. So again, always make sure you cover those ground rules. To me, each meeting needs a scribe. Honestly, it's difficult for me to take notes and facilitate at the same time. This is also a very clever way to help bring in participation from the people in the room. Find someone who can help you take notes. Another clever thing to do is, let's say you have one of those individuals in your meeting that really likes to kind of take the stage. Maybe they're always kind of breaking your ground rules. A good way to kind of get them engaged in a positive way is ask them to be the note taker. Have them be engaged in the whole flow of the meeting by being that note taker. And it's one of the things that will help kind of keep them focused on something that's adding value to that meeting. Be the facilitator. This means that in the conversation, make sure you're putting that facilitator hat on and not necessarily jumping into the content. A lot of times a facilitator can get themselves kind of deep into a conversation, and then all of a sudden 15, 20, 30 minutes goes by because they're so deep in the conversation that they forgot to pay attention to the clock. If you find that you're in a topic that you need to engage with, actually ask your group, I need someone to play facilitator for the next topic because I need to engage in that. Get someone to be that timekeeper, that person who's going to keep you focused. It's huge because it'll also, again, show that you respect people's time and want to get to all the topics. Make sure you know when to break the rules. I say this because one of the things that you've probably seen in meetings is you get a facilitator who is running a meeting by the book. When something maybe truly more pressing comes up and says, nope, we got to keep to our schedule. Knowing when to break the rules and how to ask the team permission to break the rules is key. Be willing to kind of sense and adapt as you go. Again, use your rules as your guide, but don't be so rigid in those that all of a sudden you lead people in the end to still feel like we didn't cover the right thing. Some of my best meetings have come out in the end where they said, you know what? I'm glad we switched to that topic because we needed to at that point. So just a few things to keep in mind as you're facilitating. It's your responsibility to be a good listener. Be aware of the conversation going on and help advance the discussion when needed. Know how to draw your participants back in if things start to wander a bit, and be mindful of the topics and time just to make sure everything stays on track.
Going back to the 4 principles, those are some tips for better facilitation. Next, let's move to participation. How do you ensure your meetings are focused, engaging, and inclusive for everyone involved?
A lot of times when you get into a meeting, it can feel kind of like the wild, wild west. Someone's talking here, things are happening there. Well, as a facilitator, it is your job to help kind of maintain the flow of the meeting, but at the same time, create an environment where everyone feels like they can talk. So for me, I'm a big fan of Atlassian's team playbook play called Inclusive Meetings. And it's all about how do we set ground rules for our meetings? And these are rules in terms of how do we want to collaborate? You might have examples like, hey, we're going to raise our hand when we want to speak, or for every topic, we're going to hold questions until the end of that topic. As a facilitator, you are accountable and responsible for creating an inclusive environment in your meeting so that everyone feels like they can contribute. Look for feedback afterwards to determine whether or not in that meeting, everybody felt like they could get a voice in. Use your intuition. Sometimes you can see that, hey, we've got a couple of people that are always quiet. Kind of look and say, what can I do to change my environment to help make meetings better in the future? My biggest recommendation to help keep attendees engaged is 1, use time boxes in your agenda, and 2, follow those time boxes. Keeping attendees engaged is going to come back to honoring their time, saying this is our agenda, these are what we're going to talk about, and this is when we're going to talk about it. That's really important to help keep participants engaged. Can't tell you how many times I get into a meeting and we have 10 minutes on a topic and I look at my watch and 20 minutes have gone by and we're still on that topic. For me, I feel that that facilitator isn't doing their job. And I'm like, apparently the rest of these topics don't matter. Final tip for keeping people engaged in a meeting, use the power of a parking lot. Many times we get into meetings and we find ourselves derailing a topic a little bit with a new topic. Well, as a facilitator, go in there and say, hey, that's a great topic. Let's add it to our parking lot. If we have time, maybe you've set aside time at the end of your agenda for other topics, or you need to set up a separate meeting. This allows, again, participants to feel that you value their time and you want them to get to the outcomes that they originally intended to get to in that meeting. When it comes time to end the meeting, maybe you're in the last 5 minutes of it. There's nothing worse than getting to the end of a meeting where you're midway through a conversation and now you're just having to leave. I always want to make sure I save 5 or 10 minutes on that agenda to kind of close out the meeting. Honor that time box. Make sure that you have that 5 to 10 minutes to review a couple things. Make sure you review the goal of the meeting. Did we accomplish this? I actually like to ask my participants, Roman vote, up or down with your thumbs. Did we hit the outcome? Did we get to the place we wanted to get to? Also, make sure you go back and look at your action items. Do we have owners assigned to them? Do we have due dates on those? Have people agreed to take those on? Make sure you take care of those so that way people leaving say, cool, the things that we need help with, they're gonna get done. And then finally, make sure you go back and look at the decisions you've made as well. Make sure you say, hey, in this meeting, we made the decisions on A, B, and C. Just as a reminder to the group that says, cool, these are the things that we decided. This also will help solidify for your participants that, hey, we actually got some value out of this meeting. We actually were able to get from A to B, which is more than maybe we've gotten to in the past.
In this video, you will learn how to determine if your meeting was effective, how to follow up after the meeting ends, and what to do if your meeting is ineffective.
Congratulations, you have made it. You completed your meeting. Now, the game's not over with yet. That's the thing. You gotta remember that. You've got preparation, facilitation, participation, and now we're in follow-up. It's all about closing this out. When at the end of a meeting, you need to determine how effective that meeting was. What I like to do to determine whether or not a meeting is effective is save a few minutes at the very end of the meeting to maybe ask the audience. Maybe there's good psychological safety in your group. And because of that, you can actually ask people, hey, how was this meeting? Did you like it? Was it effective? Was it valuable? Other techniques you can use that I've used in the past. If you're in a room on the whiteboard, or if you're digital, maybe you're using a Trello board, create a scale. 1 to 5. 1, this was not a very effective use of my time. I wish I was doing something else. And 5 being, oh, this was the best use of my time possible. I'm so glad I was here. As people leave, physically in the room, have a mark on that whiteboard where they're at. If they're digital, have them go ahead and vote on one of those cards, 1 to 5. And again, that just gives you information in terms of, hey, did people feel that this was an effective meeting or not?
So after the meeting ends, what's the best way to follow up with your participants?
So once your meeting's over, let's say it was an effective meeting. Let's say you did all the right stuff. Everyone's like, yeah, that was great. The first thing you've got to do after that meeting is done, go out there and make sure you send out those meeting notes. Share it with the participants as well as those people who maybe you just need to inform what was covered in that meeting. Tell them what decisions were made, share what actions were taken. And most importantly, for those folks who took actions, make sure that they're aware of those, especially if they need to have some sort of tracking of those. Great tools like Confluence allow you to actually, when you mention somebody in it, it actually sends them a notification that says, hey, you've got this action. And most importantly, after, let's say, a few days of that meeting, follow up, make sure things like actions are taken care of. One of the things I like to do is if I have a regular occurring meeting, what I'll do is at the beginning of every agenda, we'll actually have a line item to look back at prior action items. Have we taken care of those? Which ones are due? Which ones aren't? It leads to a lot of accountability on the people who actually took those actions, and it really helps move that meeting forward. Now, if you're finding you're having an ineffective meeting, it's okay. Don't beat yourself up for it. It happens to all of us, and the goal here is just to get better. So a couple things you can do here is one, go actually ask some folks, have some one-on-one sessions of saying, hey, I'd love to get better at running effective meetings. What feedback do you have for me? Figure out what could make meetings better the next time and experiment with that. Another thing you can do, and let's say it's a meeting that's on a regular basis, do what we call a ritual reset here in Atlassian. If you go to our team playbook, you'll find the ritual reset play. And it's a fantastic play that allows you to kind of take a meta view at your meetings and saying, hey, if I were to re-examine all these meetings, what would I keep because I think they're super valuable? What would I maybe change because I still need that, but something needs to change? And ultimately, what should I get rid of? Maybe what could be more of an email? What could be async here? Actually, a great story for you here is I have a customer I've been working with, a telecom, that actually found themselves in need of kind of fixing up some of their meetings. What ended up happening is they said, you know what, we'd love to try this ritual reset play out. And so they did. They actually went and spent about an hour, which is all the time it takes, running through that play. And the next day, I actually got an email from that team that says, hey, I just want to say, running this play kind of changed our perspective on how we meet. It allowed us to really take a look and say, is this meeting worthwhile or should we change it up? Should we remove it? And from there, they're able to kind of really change how they work together. All of a sudden now, they've introduced some new ways of working. They've opened up their minds to saying we can collaborate differently. So explore things like our ritual reset because it's incredibly powerful to actually look and say, hey, is this the best use of our time? And maybe it is. Let's get a little bit better at it. We can all get better at meetings. We have them all the time. And the thing is they're not going away. So our goal is to figure out how can we improve just a little bit. So I've got some tips and tricks I want to share with all of you out there who are meeting facilitators to figure out how do you run better meetings just in general. So first, always make sure you start that meeting 5 minutes later. We're all running between sessions. We're all going to one meeting to the next. And if we have to do that, let's be a hero for our participants. Let's give them a few minutes to make their way into our meeting and feel they've got a little bit of time to take a breather. That also allows you to start your meeting on time without having to wait for people to join. 2, make sure you fill out that description in the invite. I bet you if you look at your calendar right now, there's at least one meeting, my guess is a lot more than that have an empty description. Or maybe it's just the meeting information, like the Zoom information. Make sure you actually intentionally put a description in place. Fill it out. What are we trying to accomplish? List out that agenda. And a bonus on this one, make sure that the title of that meeting is impactful, that it's meaningful to your audience. Make sure you go in and actually create a meeting agenda. And I don't just mean putting it into the meeting invite, actually create a place for it. Maybe you're using a tool like Confluence. Go in there, use the meeting agenda template that we have actually out there in the tool and actually fill it out. What's the goal of the session? What are the topics we're going to cover? Who's going to talk about them? How long are we going to spend on those topics? Build in time for material review. This is a practice that Atlassian follows that I absolutely love. And it's the idea that, let's say you have a Confluence page with some pre-read material. We all know that people who get pre-read material typically don't read it. Maybe you get half, and even those half, they may have skimmed it through. I know I have in the past. What you do instead is you actually set aside time in your agenda, maybe the first 15 minutes, and you say, this is our time to read through that pre-read material. Actually have them say in Confluence, comment on the areas you have questions on or things you'd like to talk about more. This guarantees that everyone actually goes through the content. And it actually guarantees that people actually spend time on it versus saying, oh, I just skimmed it. Then what you can do is set aside time in your agenda afterwards to talk about questions or comments that came up. Instead of just going through and reading the document again or asking for questions, you're actually spending time on what people commented on in the document. It's a phenomenal activity to really get people to engage in the content. One tip I have out there is a little bit radical, but I'm a firm believer in it. Put everyone as optional on your meeting. Don't put anyone as required. As a facilitator, as an owner for a meeting, it is my job to convince you, my participant, to actually join in on that meeting. When I add you to that invite, it's not a requirement that you're there. You have to read through my agenda. You have to look at my invitation and say, yeah, this is worth my time. The thing is if you pick the right attendees and you have a compelling message, the right people are going to come. That gives the ownership back to the people to be there. And it actually requires you, the facilitator, to actually create a very impactful meeting. Again, it kind of pushes you outside your comfort zone, but I encourage you to try it out. And finally, determine if you actually need a meeting. We've got some great graphics here at Atlassian that can kind of share with you kind of that decision tree. Should I have a meeting or not? And honestly, in your world, create your own kind of decision tree. Determine if that meeting is there so that you can make a decision, or maybe you just want to share information. Determine why you need to have this meeting and really ask yourself, do I need this? And then if you say yes, ask yourself one more time, all right, do I really, really need this meeting? People will appreciate it if you find unique and clever ways to get them to collaborate on material that doesn't necessarily involve having to get people together. Thank you all for watching these videos and engaging in the content. If you need a little extra help, contact us at this email address, and our Ways of Working Atlassian team, which we call Dr. Wow, they can come in and actually spend some time with you, analyze your meetings, help you actually formulate a good agenda, and help you reach that better meetings utopia that we're all hoping for. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you later.